Hello, Yoga Healer podcast listeners. I actually think of you as collaborators, not really as listeners. I think this is a two-way conversation. At least it is for me. All right, so I'm doing this series on Dharma as part of the Master of You book release. And in this part that we're in now is the chunk on time, you and your time. And is how you're using your time. Is that optimized to the vision that you have for your life? Now, in the critical issues that we just covered in the fire episode, that was the episode we released a week ago. In that episode, I really got into like understanding what your vision is and what the critical issues are. And then what happens is next in the book, what we go into is like, how do you put that into real time? What changes need to happen in real time for you to start doing the things that align to who you want to become next, doing the things that make the thing you want to happen next a reality. And so this element time, this is the element of air. And it's oh man, it just doesn't lie, right? Like what happens in real time. And I'm going to read a little bit about time. I'm going to read a little bit from the book. There's really great resources at masterofyou.us. Masterofyou.us is how I thought of it when I bought that domain. And in the workbook, you're going to find a lot of activities around you and your time. So time management itself is a bit of a misnomer. Like, can we actually manage time? The yogis measure time in breaths, right? And so you can manage your breath, but like time's happening. Time's part of the universal. It's part of the universal principles. Time is. Can you manage it or can you manage you? Right? And what I find often is it has everything to do with calendar integrity. So a lot of people talk about time management, and I think it's important to realize that like it's how you manage you in the field of time. So the yogis would manage themselves in the field of time through breath practice. The whole practice of pranayama, if you go into the writings about it, the yogis will talk about how to measure their life in breath cycles. And so in order to extend their life, they figured out that they could extend their breath. Fascinating, right? So the science of longevity, as it's been understood for 4,000 years from the tradition of yoga, is totally linked to deeper, slower breaths that relax awareness and relax the physiology into the parasympathetic nervous system. This is where you slow aging down. You're not in the quick aging process of fight or flight. So it's important to get that like we've known as humans how to manage ourselves in relationship to the field of time for thousands and thousands of years. We've understood this relationship. Now, the practice for anyone who's ever done breathing practices consistently over time know that there's a discipline to it. I'm going to start to read a little bit more about this from Master of You. So this is part of the calendar integrity section. As Jocko Willink, commander of the most decorated special ops unit of the Iraq War and a Navy SEAL for 20 years, emphatically points out, discipline equals freedom. Jocko states, if you want more free time, you have to follow a more disciplined time management system. Each day you can run, end quote. Each day you can run experiments with your time. What will you do when? What will you delete, delegate, or focus on? What do you want to do in your unstructured time? James Clear writes, time magnifies the margin between success and failure. It will multiply whatever you feed it. Good habits make time your ally. Bad habits make time your enemy. So both are clear that it's how you use time. Right? Are you using time to create what you want, or are you actually kind of fighting against time in how you're habituating your life? What little habits add up throughout the day? I was surprised at a retreat I just led here in Mexico, and it was on the Wellness Pro Day. We have a special VIP day often for Wellness Pros to work on their career skills. And what came up was fascinating, like how many people in my community are still really struggling with how to manage attention, right? In terms of like all the social media stuff in terms of like how to use their phone in a way that actually gets them to the goals that they have instead of working against them. And that's not uncommon at all, right? Like this is actually part of typical modern culture right now, and we're all struggling with attention management. So the deal is that the more jurisdiction you decide to take over your time, the less stress you experience and the more free and empowered you become. So your life is yours. Your time is your life. In mastering time, you reshape your habits using your daily and weekly calendar to steer directly towards your milestones. Now, the milestones that you set up, this comes out of fire element. So once you identify like the critical issues between you and your vision of you and where you want to go next, you and who you're becoming next, you can look into smaller, like what are the milestones along the way that will help you know that you're on track. And that will help you break down the larger journey into realizable smaller steps. Now, think big, test small, fail fast, learn always. I covered in the Dharma and Mindset chapter of this podcast. So if you didn't hear that one, you might go back and listen after this around what that means, like to think big and test small. So in the case of your time and calendar integrity, like how you're using your calendar, which is a tool for how you're pointing your awareness in the field of time, as you identify milestones of like where you say you'll be by when, that's moving you towards this greater vision. And that next chunk that is critical for you to get to en route, right? The next pit stop. That's what the milestone is. When you align your time via your calendar towards your milestone and you're ruthless with yourself, you're not allowing yourself all this wiggle room over, did I really mean that? Do I feel like it right now? But you actually do what needs to get done to get there in real time. What happens is you start to be able to bend time. You start to be able to make time, which is not going anywhere. You start to make time your asset, and you start to be able to get way more done in way less time. And the more done is more aligned. What you're doing is much more aligned than more quantity. What happens is you have higher quality days, day after day. You do higher quality work week after week. And so milestones come quickly and more easily with time. Now, Master of You is an iterative system. So often, like the first time through as people go through this whole lesson on time and calendar integrity, it's totally wonky for them. And often what they realize is that they're out of time. They're out of integrity with their calendar, meaning they put stuff on their calendar that they need to do, and then they don't do it, right? They don't feel like doing it when it arises. Now, of course, this happens if we really look at identity evolution, like how you're evolving into a greater life for yourself, which is going to cause you to change. It's going to cause you to transform and grow. That the current you is different than the future you. And the current you is habituated. You have patterns. You have ways of using time that are going to need to change. So again, it's you management. It's like the yogis managing their breath and breathing practices. Now, what happens is over iterations with using this system in Master of You, what my members experience in the Awake Living course, which corresponds with the book, which actually the community gave birth to the book, is that people get to become masters of time. And that everything changes, right? Everything changes, and it doesn't change all at once. It happens through seasonal iterations of just getting better and better at calendar integrity, getting better at identifying the critical issues between them and the vision they're trying to achieve and what issues arise, and planning for it by addressing directly what the strategy is in order to build the assets, build the relationships, build the skills, build the resources in order to turn opportunities into actualities. So the coolest thing about this is you get better and better and better at you and time. And soon you notice, as I have, that you get to like create and recreate your ideal calendar season by season. So my calendar is fairly dynamic about once a season. Once a season, I look at like what it is that is the most important stuff for me to do. And in order to achieve not just goals in terms of work goals, but goals in terms of pleasure goals, goals in terms of family goals, goals in terms of how I want my life, what I want to experience next for real right now. And then I shapeshift my calendar into how it needs to be next for all that to go down. That itself will bring up critical issues. And you might realize that your strategic planning needs a little more work, that you can't do it all. You can't get it all done, not in the way that you want to, not in the way that you will be your best self in. All right. So in Mastering Air Element, I'm going to read a little from the book. You will shapeshift your time, your calendar to manifest your seasonal milestones. You'll structure the hours of your week to experience flow, focus, and freedom. You'll uncover what you need to stop doing to free up time and what could be delegated. Master of Air is full of possibility and thinking outside the box, which is where we begin. Air element, also known as Vayu or wind in Ayurveda, is the movement across space. To understand this concept of air element and time, let's momentarily turn back to air's partner, space element. You'll recall that space's main quality is expansion, which is movement without a direction. Space in its omnipresent quality expands faster than light moves. Expansion creates space, and then air moves directionally through that space. Conceptually, movement across space creates the measurement of time, like the time it takes the wind to cross the valley. Similarly, the distance between heavenly bodies is measured in time, in light years, seconds, and minutes. Light travels the distance from the moon to our eyes in about 1 second, which means the moon is about 1 light second away. Sunlight takes about 8 minutes to reach our eyes, so the sun is about 8 light minutes away. We measure time in cycles. A day is the time it takes the Earth to spin around once, a year by the time the Earth takes to loop around the sun. In this chapter, you'll connect the freedom and movement of air element with the concept of time and the season's measuring of your movement along the milestones. Jordan Peterson, who's the author of 12 Rules for Life, he says, act on what you say so you can find out what happens. Then pay attention, end quote. So this is what happens when you actually start to act on your milestones, and it sets you up for the next evolution of your changing calendar. When you restructure your calendar to support your milestones, you actually bolster your spiritual growth. Your Dharma requires this management of your calendar to achieve your vision. It's hard to do at first, but with practice, it actually becomes natural. And what you start to experience is more and more freedom with your time. I can't emphasize that enough. And when I look back to, and it's funny because like when I look back on so many things, like when I was writing Body Thrive, it kept occurring to me how like that book would have been really helpful to me as a teenager. A lot of my health issues I had growing up were avoidable. They did not need to be experienced. And it was just simply habits. It's just very, very simply the habits of yogis. I didn't have them. I had no idea. And I was out of alignment. In the same way, how to use a calendar, it's kind of like a checkbook. If you weren't taught how to like balance a checkbook account, you might find that you have trouble balancing a checkbook, right? And so the same thing's true with like, how do you balance a calendar? And then how do you have integrity with a calendar? And how do you shift your calendar seasonally? Because if you're on a high growth path, or say you're trying to bust through an income ceiling, or say you're trying to drastically live Dharma on a greater scale, your calendar is where it goes down. Your calendar is the scorekeeper between you and your next level. So once you understand this, once you're like, oh, okay, it all goes down in my calendar. I need to have integrity with my calendar. I have to make the best plan in my calendar, and then I got to show up and do what I say I'll do then. Now, when most people I coach do this, they're actually surprised at how they're great at like figuring out their ideal calendar, their milestones, plugging it in. And then what happens is they find that they don't feel like doing what's on their calendar. Now, this is problematic, right? This is where that tapas really comes in, because now we have a different critical issue, which is you and your integrity. And that's kind of a harsh thing, right? Like some of you might be like, I don't want to hear that. Sunshine, roses, flowers, please. Right? Not like you have an issue with your own integrity and doing what you say you're going to do by when. But it happens, what I notice really happens over time is the more you become aware of this and the more you see it exactly for what it is, the more you actually start to repair that gap in your integrity, just like potholes in the road, right? And you start to fill in those potholes little step by step. And soon you'll notice that you get better at it. And soon you won't put anything on your calendar that you're not actually going to do. You just will not do that anymore. And that might be black belt and you might not be black belt now. And that's what happens. That's okay. I'm going to read a little section from Master of You on becoming master of time, or air element. So optimizing your calendar as a spiritual practice. Big questions arise as you schedule your milestones into your life, as you attempt to do what you say you'll do. As Jordan Peterson writes, act on what you say so you can find out what happens. Then pay attention. End quote. Acting on your milestones sets you up for the next evolution by changing your calendar. Restructuring your calendar to support your milestones bolsters your spiritual growth. Your Dharma requires schedule management to achieve your vision. This is hard to do at first, but with practice, it becomes natural. The practice is making big or little decisions that prioritize your emerging identity from your past identity. This includes skillful blocking of time for your evolving needs. Now in this, this ties into body rhythms as well. So how do you need to live your day that optimizes for your body? Because when you do that, you have better rhythm and that leads to increased states of focus, productivity, and rejuvenation. So seeing in this light, prioritizing your milestones into your schedule and having integrity with what you put on your schedule, this becomes a body, mind, and spirit practice. Now, I can't emphasize this enough because we can look at what's a spiritual practice? And for many people, they think what I do on my yoga mat's a spiritual practice, or what I do on my meditation cushion is my spiritual practice, or the conversations that I have, the interactions I have in my life when I am super mindful, that's my spiritual practice. But what about how you're structuring your calendar week after week? And you might think I'm not structuring my calendar. My calendar just is. It just is, and it stays the same, and I keep doing the same things. So if that's the case, there's what I when I see that, I'm like, something's not aligned, because your emerging identity, for you to change, for you to grow, for you to live into next level of your Dharma, this requires shifting in all 5 elements. And time is an element. We already went through that, how air and time, how that works, how that's really describing the same thing. So how your future self, who's achieved the goals, achieved the vision that you want to step into next, that person uses time differently than you do currently. If not, you would have already achieved that vision. And that's something sometimes that's a bit hard to digest. And this is where some of the integrity gaps come up of oh, wow, if I'm really going to get serious about stepping into the next level of Dharma, if I'm going to get serious about this vision, how do I need to use time tomorrow? Now, what I love about this is this really activates freedom. You are free in how you design time. The yogis figured that out, right? With their breath cycles. They figured out that I can change time, my experience of time, by just changing how I breathe. And I'm the one who gets to decide how I breathe. I'm the one who gets to decide. And for many people, they feel stuck, they can't change what's on their calendar. But what if you entertain the opposite thought? What if you entertain the thought that allows to growth? What if you can change anything that's on your calendar? And what needs to change first? Where are the tightest spots of you have stuff on there that you don't feel like doing? And this brings us back to the beginning of the book about what's the bigger dream. By this phase in the book in Master of You have a strategy to deal with this head on. I know many of us listening to the podcast haven't read the book. We're not in the course. We're not doing the exercises. So this is a bit of a fast forward. What happens with the process of as you get really clear on what's not working in your life and what you want to change, that gives rise to next level identity. As you start to clear your space for that and become that person next. And as you get grounded in the body rhythms that support that person into next level energy integrity, what happens is you get a really clear vision, right? That's fire element. You deal with the critical issues that arise in becoming that person, and you start to shift how you use time. And that's where we are right now. So all that, if you're doing the book or doing the course, like all that is happening by now. So now the calendar becomes the playground. Now the calendar, and I honestly do use my calendar as a playground. Like clear the slate every season. How, as a spiritual practice, how do I shape my activities in the field of time next? In this next season. And I lead by desire in such a strong way, right? Of like, if there's stuff that I'm like, I don't look forward to doing that then, well, then why am I doing that? Why am I forcing my life into that relationship with time? And what happens is you really do, as you become black belt with this, you start to realize that like people that experience a lot of power and a lot of freedom have been doing this work. They've been doing this work of optimizing their calendar as a spiritual practice. They might not use those words, but if you ask a few questions, a few layers deep, you find out a lot. And that's why Jordan Peterson writes, act on what you say so you find out what happens. Then pay attention. All right, so this is just a little introduction of what happens when you become master of time, when you have integrity with your calendar, doing what you say you'll do, when you schedule your next action steps to hit your seasonal milestones, when you delete and delegate as a time practice, and when you schedule time for planning your seasonal and annual milestones to achieve your greater vision. Again, you can find the workbook at masterofyou.us, and that's where you can also get all the links to the book, the Audible version, which is awesome. Thank you, Elsie Escobar, for recording that. I love it. And you can just find out like where to get the book and get your free workbook that goes with it. I would love you to leave a review on Amazon if you've been following along with the book, and it's just a great way you can just give a little back. All right. Thanks all for listening. And I hope you read Master of You. If you want coaching from me on how to actualize your bigger ambitions, your bigger dreams, go to yogahealer.com/dream. And you can schedule a free conversation to explore what are your deeper ambitions, what is Dharma for you in the next phase of your life. I highly recommend these sessions. People love having these sessions. And if you're a good fit to be coached by me into your ambitions, then we'll let you know how. All right. Namaste and have a great day.